Candela, did you fill out the U.S. Census in 2020?
Não, não preenchi, não sabia.
No, I didn't do it because I didn't have information about it.
This is In the Loop. I'm Bianca Ficini in for Christian Bryant. The census numbers are out, and before you ask, why should I care, we've got 1.5 trillion reasons for you, meaning these census results help determine how $1.5 trillion of federal funding is spent on things like schools, hospitals, roads, and much more over the next decade. The George Washington Institute for Public Policy reports that 316 federal programs used 2010 census data to distribute the funds in 2017. A lot of these federal grants use census data to figure out where funding is most needed. That's what 94% of these programs used to decide how the money would be divvied out. That includes some really crucial government programs like Medicaid, which is the largest source of federal revenue for state-level budgets. By the way, 1 in 5 people in the US are covered by Medicaid, and about 40% of Medicaid recipients are children. But census data doesn't just shape healthcare funding. It also shapes highway funding. The Highway Planning and Construction Program uses census data to distribute funding to the national highway system. This year, the American Society of Civil Engineers gave America's roads a D rating. So clearly this money is important and in many cases, badly needed. They noted in a report that 40% of the system is in, quote, poor or mediocre condition. Right now, there's a $786 billion backlog of road and bridge needs, and the federal government is relying on census data to sort through that. One more major program that relies on census data for you, SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. The Census Bureau says 13.8 million U.S. households receive SNAP. SNAP also funds the National School Lunch Program, which helps all U.S. schools provide free and reduced-price meals to the students who need them. Based on census data, SNAP receives about $71 billion a year in federal funding. But when the census misses people in need, that funding figure shrinks. The census directs funding for all of these programs and also helps redraw congressional districts. So it determines how many lawmakers your state gets. And it's what the government turns to in deciding who gets financial help through those pandemic-era stimulus checks. Healthcare, highways, waking up with some extra money in your bank account, that's all decided by these new census results. But the census definitely has a few flaws, namely in tracking race and ethnicity, and in getting a true account of some underrepresented communities. Newsy reporter Axel Tercios has a deeper dive on that.
Bianca, the 2020 U.S. Census data shows the U.S. is a more diverse and multiracial country than ever. However, the data collection done in 2020 has been the most challenging of any census year, counting a population in the middle of a pandemic and in the middle of an embattled political year. Multiracial growth and a shrinking white population, this for the first time in the nation's history.
We see that level that indicates the direction in which the country is going.
According to the 2020 U.S. Census data, people of color represented 43% of the total U.S. population. That's up from 34% in 2010. The white, non-Hispanic population decreased by 8.6%. The Hispanic Latino population, the largest minority in the country, grew to more than 62 million people in 2020, a growth of 23%. Still, there's reason to believe that some in these communities went undercounted.
The numbers are not reported in their totality.
They're as accurate as they can be considering the circumstances.
Dr. Maria Elshiva at Florida International University says that although the data collection in 2020 was hit by the COVID-19 pandemic and a chaotic election year, the census did a good job on collecting data.
A third of households had to be counted through other ways. In other words, what are the other ways? Through census enumerators, through door-to-door canvassers. In the middle of a pandemic, that was a hard challenge to meet.
They are not really accurate because the community were underreported, especially in the immigrant community.
Nora Sandigo has been fighting for the rights of the undocumented community in the country for over 30 years. She says most undocumented families did not fill out their census forms. Honduran Dania Palma didn't do it.
¿Por qué no quiso llenar el censo el año pasado? Why didn't you fill out the census?
Por miedo a que en este momento pues no tenía.
She says she was afraid to because she didn't have a green card. She was scared.
Dr. Elshiva ran a model for Newsy. She found that if the growth in the Hispanic community remains like the last decade, then this population will become the majority by the mid-2090s.
Hispanics are also multiracial. They may be white, they may be black, they may be a mix of races.
South Florida, for example, is not just about the Cuban community anymore.
But we also have growing Venezuelan, Honduran, Ecuadorian, other Latin communities like Brazilians.
In fact, Dr. Elshiva says Brazilians are an example of communities that were less likely to fill out their census forms because of language barriers.
Dandara, você preencheu o recenseamento da população em 2020. Dandara, did you fill out the U.S. Census in 2020?
Não, não preenchi, não sabia desse informação.
No, I didn't do it because I didn't have information about it. I had little time in the US, and I also didn't know English yet.
Quando eu cheguei, não sabia de nada.
The new U.S. Census numbers will also play a role in the redistricting process. But according to Dr. Elshiva, the Hispanic community increase won't make a huge difference on future elections.
So even though they're the largest minority bloc, I think they still don't have the voting power that the Black African community has.
Based on the 2020 numbers, Texas will gain 2 seats, while states like Florida, Montana, and North Carolina will gain 1 seat each. California, Illinois, Michigan, and New York will lose 1 seat each.
According to the 2020 U.S. Census, here in Florida, 9% of the population identify themselves as multiracial. That's a 55% increase over 2010. Bianca.
Since the pandemic started, a lot of people have shifted their lifestyles and their priorities. When it comes to education, Black parents had the highest spike in homeschooling their children. And not virtual learning, we're talking actual homeschooling. Newsy reporter Tammy Estwick talks with a few families to find out why they made the switch.
You basically have to treat them like a biohazard. Every time they walk in the door, you got to spray them down head to toe immediately.
Jackson, Mississippi, father of 4, Lateef Skinner, talking about their family battle against COVID. It's why they decided to homeschool.
For health, for, I guess, parental sanity.
The Skinners, part of a growing trend, parents homeschooling their kids in order to avoid pandemic problems.
But there's a second trend they fit into. The U.S. Census Bureau says Black parents had the highest spike of teaching their kids at home during the pandemic, going from 3% in the spring to 16% in fall 2020. By the way, that nationwide survey specifically asked parents if they were homeschooling or doing virtual learning through schools.
The Census Bureau said that there was an increase of 500% based on previous research.
Dr. Khadija Ali Coleman and Dr. Cheryl Field Smith run blackfamilyhomeschool.org. The website, a vast resource for everyone from researchers to Black parents looking to homeschool or currently doing it.
COVID really provided the perfect storm for parents to begin to make that transition to homeschooling.
They say they're not surprised by the statistics after hearing from parents who complained about everything from racism to a lack of compassion when schools went virtual.
What was really unearthed is this lack of ease in transitioning in real lifetime instruction to a virtual environment. Many of the schools and many of the teachers lacked the grace when it came to grading, when it came to interacting with children.
When we look at the history of Black education in America, these schools weren't meant for us. When you look at discipline disproportionality, it's our children who are 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on which research study you look at, times likely to be expelled or suspended beginning in pre-K. I mean, really.
Former teacher turned mom of 2 boys, Victoria Jones says she and her husband always considered homeschooling, but the pandemic gave them an extra push.
Even if I wanted to send my child to preschool right now, I would not, because Greg Abbott has a ban on masking mandates.
The Houston mom, originally from Alabama, says she's protecting her kids, not just from COVID.
I had some great experiences at school, but then I also had some not so great experiences at school. One of my teachers that I really liked in 12th grade, we had a great relationship. I asked her to write me a recommendation for college, and she wrote on the recommendation, "Victoria is smart for a person of her color." And just things like that, I don't want my kids to have to face that either.
When you're not going to listen to us, when you're going to mistreat our children, when you're not going to see their talent and gifts that they bring, yeah, we're going to homeschool.
Back in Jackson, Skinner says while COVID led them to homeschool, it might not be permanent.
I want my kids to be around in certain sports or be around certain people. But for right now, this is the best option.
Plus, his kids really miss the simple things.
They absolutely miss hearing the bell ring.
Tammy Eswick, Newsy.
Coming up next, we'll have the latest on Afghanistan and how experts are assessing the Taliban's next moves.